So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar for Carers' Rights Day 2025. This year's theme is Know Your Rights, Use Your Rights. My name is Lisa Crowther, and I'm a member of the Carers Manchester Lived Experience panel, and I'll be chairing the webinar tonight. The Carers Lived Experience panel is a group for unpaid carers to share decision making with professionals and use their expertise to make positive changes in the community. In Manchester, a lot of support for unpaid carers is provided by Carers Manchester. This is a partnership between statutory organisations and local and national charities that provide support to unpaid carers in the city. Caring can be a 24/7, 365 days a year role. And for many carers, it can have an impact on finances, uncertainty about their rights, and access to information regarding legal matters such as power of attorney. This webinar has been planned with the support of unpaid carers and members of the Carers Manchester team to provide information and discussions around the more practical issues can arise as part of caring for a loved one. We've identified three distinct areas of discussion. So carers assessments, legal issues related to caring, and welfare benefits. Our panel for discussions on these topics tonight are Una from Carers Manchester Contact Point, Jane, a solicitor with CJ Law, and Michael from the Welfare and Benefits team at the Contact Point. We welcome any questions from attendees to members of the webinar panel. You can ask questions through the chat function at the bottom of the screen. You can add comments at any point. If the question is for a specific person, it's helpful if you mention that person in your question. Eve from the Carers Manchester team is moderating the chat and will select the questions from there for the panelists. We'll do our best to respond to the questions during the webinar, but we might not have enough time to answer everything. We will also send any information and resources mentioned in discussions by email after the event. So we have a couple of ground rules for the webinar, just two of them. If anyone shares any personal experiences, please treat those as confidential. And please treat different opinions with respect. And lastly, we want to inform you that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared online afterwards. Any comments that you do post in the chat will not show up in the recording. So we'll now move on to the first discussion around carers assessments. Identifying yourself as a carer can be beneficial, as this can open doors to practical, emotional and financial support. First point of contact for many carers is the Carers Manchester Contact Point, which provides support through phone and email. The contact point provides information and advice about carers' rights and support available, benefits advice, signposting and referrals to other organisations, and referrals for carers assessments. We'll put the details of the contact point in the chat. The Carers Manchester website and their online newsletters are also useful resources of information about carers' rights, events, and support available. Unfortunately, the carers assessment team at Manchester City Council could not join us for tonight's webinar, but Una from the contact point has offered to contribute to this evening's discussions as she processes referrals for carers assessments as part of her role in the contact point. So I'd like to introduce Una to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. So yeah, my name's Una, and I'm one of the support workers at Carers Manchester Contact Point. As Lisa mentioned before, we're the first point of contact for unpaid carers in the Manchester area to access support. So we're a gateway to signpost carers for ongoing support. We provide an overview of support that's available for unpaid carers, which could look very different for people. So that could look like emotional support, practical, financial, absolutely anything. So a large part of what we do is that we are the main access point for carers to request care assessments. As Lisa mentioned as well, we also run a helpline for carers, that's open Monday to Friday, 10 till 4 p.m., except on Wednesdays when it's open 9 until 4 p.m. You can also send inquiries to our main email address, which will be shared. And of course, above all else, we lend an empathetic listening ear, and we want to make sure you get the support you need from the right services and the right people who can support you.
Great. Thanks, Una. I've got a few questions for you. Could you tell us what is a carer's assessment? Who carries it out? What happens during the assessment? And what kind of questions are asked? Things like that.
Sure. So, a care assessment. So, first of all, Carers Trust defines carers as anyone who cares for unpaid for a friend, a family member, who due to illness, disability, a mental health problem, or an addiction cannot cope without their support. So first of all, don't be put off by the word assessment. It's not a test. It's not a test on your caring abilities. It's really a chance for you to discuss with your local council, which would be Manchester City Council, um, about your caring role and your situation and what they can do off their end to support you physically and emotionally. So they'll use the assessment to find out what support you need, whether you're willing or able to carry on caring, what you want to achieve in your daily life, and whether you qualify for help. So most assessments are conducted by the cared for's local authority, so Manchester City Council in this case. And usually it's carried over the phone. Sometimes it is carried out face to face, depending on the person and the situation. And it should be done at a time and a place that's convenient for the carer.
Okay, thanks for that. So you mentioned about Manchester City Council. So if a carer wants a carer's assessment, do they contact the contact point or Manchester City Council?
Sure, yeah. So the first step is to contacting us at Carers Manchester Contact Point. So we don't actually conduct the assessments ourselves, but we can refer the carer, which is carried out by the council, the assessment. So we would register the carer, get some personal details from them, and send the details over to the council to be put on a waiting list to have an assessment. So whichever team the assessment sent to with the council, usually they contact the carer within 4 weeks, apart from urgent cases, which is different, to advise they've gotten the referral from us, the details, and then, yeah, which I mentioned, the care is allocated to a waiting list. So I can't give an exact timeline, but normally the waiting list, it can take between 8 to 10 weeks. That's just an estimate. And any inquiries they have about the assessment in the meantime would be with the council directly, which we can give the number afterwards if anyone needs.
Okay. And how often should a carer apply for a carer's assessment?
Sure. So a carer can have an assessment every 12 months. Now, that is the personal budget, which we can come to in a moment. A carer can request a care assessment anytime within the 12 months, but just in regards to getting a personal budget from the assessment, that would be every 12 months.
And is that done automatically or is it up to the carer to chase that up?
So sure, so it's up to the carer. So we would encourage carers to record the date of whenever their care assessment is carried out, and then they can request a review every year around that date. And then they can request it up to 6 weeks in advance of when they last had their assessment to prevent any delays for themselves as well.
Okay, great. And you mentioned before about carer's personal budget. which comes from the carer's allowance. How does that differ from carer's allowance, or what is a carer's personal budget?
Sure. Okay. So a carer's personal budget, it's not means tested in any way. It's not based on, the carer's income or anything like that. A personal budget is kind of like a one-off payment or a grant, and it's just for the carer to put towards things that would support their own well-being. So, for example, like a holiday or a break, that kind of thing. Those are just some examples, but it's for the carer and their own well-being. As we understand how difficult it is for carers to get some
Yeah.
time for themselves.
So if it's just a one-off payment, will that affect um, any other benefits or pensions or earnings?
So yeah, like I mentioned before, it's not means tested. So it doesn't matter if a carer is claiming carer's allowance. It shouldn't include if they have no recourse to public funds or their immigration status. Um, Now it shouldn't affect if they're on a pension credit. However, I think Michael, our benefits advisor, might be able to shed more light on that than I would be.
You're completely right. It doesn't do anything. It has no impact on anything and doesn't need to be reported to anyone.
Great, thank
Right.
you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Una. Eve, do we have any questions around the contact points or the carers assessments in the chat?
Hi, so thanks, Una, for that. We've got one question, which is, if someone believes that they're not being treated fairly by their local authority or the NHS or the GP practice, how would they escalate this?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Um, so if someone believes that they're not being treated fairly by the local authority, the NHS, or maybe their GP, how would they escalate that?
Okay, so it would depend on if they are receiving, so if they say they're being treated unfairly, I suppose I would have a couple of questions asked as well. So if they, for example, are getting support from Manchester City Council as like a package of care, if they have a disability or if they're a carer and they're being treated unfairly, then I'd recommend contacting the council directly, and they can put in a formal complaint if they like. Another option would be to contact an impartial advisory service, um, like Health Watch Manchester, which I can also give the details for if anyone needs.
That would be great, thank you.
Sure.
Also, another question. If someone says, I understand that as a carer, I can expect some preferential treatment from my GP, such as regular health checks, what do I have to do to access this or be registered as a carer with my GP?
Okay. So normally if you speak with your GP, you should be able to register with them as a carer. And if in some cases that would support if, for example, the person you care for has a disability, which means they can't leave the home, or even for the carer themselves. In some circumstances, depending on the GP practices, they could make some allowances. For example, if they can conduct home visits, which would be suitable for the person. I hope, does that answer the question?
Yeah. If anyone has any other questions for Una, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A as we go.
Great, thanks. If there's no more questions at the moment, then. So we'll move on to our second discussion, which is about legal rights.